Scott, can you see me today or this evening?
I can see you now, yes.
Oh, good.
I think because I sent you a Teams invite
Mhm.
instead of a Zoom, that may have been what the issue was this morning. So,
Well, I unplugged everything and plugged everything back in. I'm like, Mary Jo, check it for me. So glad it's working.
age of technology, right?
Exactly. Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so I guess we'll get started um, with our council president not here tonight. I'll just kind of start this work session out tonight. I thank you guys for all coming. We do have a couple guests tonight on here, and we are streaming, and this is being taped for the public purposes. Tonight we have our guest from the library, Scott Morgan, which will start our conversation off with the library. And then our owner's rep for GPD is on here too, Jason Oldie. So welcome to you too, and thanks again, Council, for coming tonight on your week off. So as we continue to move forward on this civic campus with the police station and City Hall, I think, it was in the back of everyone's mind, what are we going to do next as far as the recreation center and as far as next steps with the library. Most of you recall the library conversation came up during the master plan process. The library came out and did a presentation for the steering committee and went through the needs for their building. Currently, I think it's 15,000 square feet, and they were looking at expanding to 24,000 square feet. And just to remind everyone, the library is home branch to about 30,000 people. So it goes beyond the Brooklyn borders into Cleveland, Parma, and the surrounding areas for those who call the Brooklyn branch their home. So this is still an interest to them. It is one of their high priorities with the expansion. So, going into what the master plan said basically is, let's explore this option of this civic campus. So this is exactly what we're doing now. And with the city hall that's going to be demolished, we have this opportunity to see if the library fits in with the civic campus and moving forward. I continue to stay in contact with Executive Director Tracy Strobel, who's on vacation this week. And there is still this interest. So we have this opportunity for the library to move in our current City Hall location and be a part of the civic campus. So there's a few questions that come up as how this deal would exactly work as far as land. And then what would be the use of the current building in that state? So as far as what the library does typically with Andy sent me a message. Do you still, my screen not big enough, Andy?
If you can make it just a little bit bigger.
Okay. Is that good?
Perfect, thanks.
Just interrupt me anytime. This is very, I know it gets complicated, the fact that we're not in a room together, but interrupt me, do exactly what we do if we were normally in a room together. So going back to that land, what they're doing with, as they build up their libraries and expanding them and building new, is they're creating deeds with the city, and they're deeding the property, the city are deeding the property over to the library. And in that deed, there's a restriction of use for the library purpose only. So currently, the deed of their current location says if the library is not using that current location, then the school has the right, since it was originally their property, to request that land revert back to them. Well, in this case, it would be that the city, it would revert automatically back to the city if the library wasn't using it for that purpose, if we were to welcome to the Civic Center. So that is how that acquisition would work. And then the current building as it is, I did have a chance to sit down with the superintendent, Dr. Claris, and the school board and him have already talked about what they would do with that building should the city move forward with this type of project. And they foresee using that building for their digital academy, as well as administrative offices. So one of the things I worried about is leaving an empty building sitting there on Ridge Road with no use, because in the big scheme of things, that building's in good shape. They just did renovations. It could have a valid use, but the school does see that there is a use for that building as it stands today. So that's good news. So before we move on, Scott, I'm gonna kind of push it over to you if there's anything you'd like to add that I missed, and then I'm going to push it out for City Council to have any questions, and just let's create a dialogue about this.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Mayor Gallagher, and members of City Council for inviting us to the table. We really are very interested in this project, excited about this. You know, as part of our master plan, one of the things we did with the current branch was that we did a renovation, because at the time it wasn't feasible to expand that building on its existing site. We do know that the building is not of size for the community, so this would be a really good opportunity for us to take a look at increasing the size of the building and building a more current building that's more in line with some of our other library branches. So we certainly do appreciate the opportunity. I think you did a very good job of summarizing what has already been discussed. So I'm here just to hopefully answer any questions that I can. If I can't for some reason answer that question, I'll certainly write all of those down, and we'll get back to you in a very timely manner.
Scott, one question I think you could answer. Would you talk about timing a little bit, when the library would be prepared as far as timing?
Yeah, so I think we're prepared to move fairly quickly on this. I know it sounds like with the discussions we've had with the mayor so far that you are also interested in moving this project forward fairly quickly. We are in the midst of two projects right now. One of those being the Richmond Schools project. We are moving the Richmond Library, which is one of our smaller branches, but certainly we are in the midst of a project in which we would be part of their school. The space is basically built and finished. We're just now kind of waiting for furniture. We'll more than likely open that library branch to the public sometime in July. We wanted to give the school the opportunity to get into the new building, kind of get things rolling, and then not have us kind of in the way. So our plan is to move in probably sometime in July and start using that building in July. The other project that we just broke ground on last week was Bay Village. We are constructing a new Bay Village branch. So we're at a good point right now where we have one project almost completed, and we have one project that's well on its way. So we would be at a good position right now to take a look at starting another branch project. And certainly Brooklyn fits the bill and would be the next one in line that we would want to take a look at. So timeline, we're ready to move fairly quickly.
Any questions from City Council?
Question I've got is it's going from 15,000 square feet, what Katie mentioned, to 24,000. With
Right.
where you're building, are you going to have enough room, footprint let's say you need another expansion to, work on that as well, if you need it?
Or you're talking about like a future expansion sometime
Right.
in the future? Well, I think we'd have to take a look at, first of all, the design of the building and look at how it would fit on the site, and then we would be able to make that determination. We always are looking at that possibility, so we would make sure that whoever we would talk to about designing the building, they would be aware of that and know that that could be something that could happen in the future.
Okay.
And this would be a building from scratch, correct? When we plan on taking the current building completely down, and it would be a library from scratch, right?
Right. Our plan would be to build a library from scratch, correct? I don't know if you've probably been in some of our newer buildings. One of the things that we certainly like to do in the new buildings is do a raised floor, and not building a building from scratch and doing a renovation doesn't allow us to do that. And so our preference would be to build a building from the ground up.
I had one question. I don't know if it's too early even to think about, but I know back when I think it was Tracy came and talked with the master plan group about this potential, talked about some of the additional resources that a new building would allow. Can you remind me or elaborate on some of the potential resources that like building this new building would allow Brooklyn's branch to offer?
Sure, absolutely. So one of the first things that comes to mind would be an innovation center. I don't know if you've been in any of the branches that have those innovation centers, but certainly this would give us the opportunity with a larger building to add an innovation center to the branch. Also, I'm sure that the youth area would be a bigger and more interactive youth space. That's been one of our priorities in some of our new buildings, well, in all of our new buildings. And also too, added meeting room space. As you know, the current branch, that meeting room gets a lot of multi-use, including homework centers after school. So we would build a dedicated homework center space and then also add as many meeting rooms for the public as we could. Because certainly I think all of us are hoping that we get back to some kind of normalcy after COVID. And so this would give us the opportunity to build additional meeting space for the community to use. So those are three of the things that come to mind that we would certainly want to include in a new and larger building.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Morgan?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. How long, I know it might be kind of hard to determine this, but how long do you think something that size, the 24,000 square feet, would take to actually build, with actually demoing the current building and, building the new one?
Well, not knowing exactly what would be involved with demoing the old building, I assume there would be some issues that would need to be taken care of, like asbestos abatement, those kinds of things.
Sorry to interrupt, Scott, but we've already done, our asbestos abatement study, and that's part of our project. We built that into the cost of.
Oh, okay.
So that would be at the tail end of our project, demolishing the current building.
Okay. So if we're looking at a timeline of when we would break ground until the building, we would actually cut a ribbon on the building, we're probably looking at about an 18-month project. Somewhere between 16 and 18 months.
Thank you.
I don't have any specific questions. We've actually been talking about this for quite a while now. I think the new library building would be a very good fit for what we envision for that area of the city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mayor Gallagher, of course, did share a site plan with us, and we think it would be an ideal location. We were at one point, before we renovated the old branch, we were looking at the possibility of, even renting some current space, like an old retail store or something like that, and building that out, putting the dollars into that. And the problem every time was just site. And when this came up, this is just absolutely perfect for the city. It places it exactly where it needs to be.
I mean, I know we're excited about our new city hall, but I just think this would be definitely like the crown jewel of our city center. I can't think of anything I would want to go to replace the old city hall more than a new library for our community.
Great. We feel it's a perfect location for us too. So we're very pleased with that.
Anybody else have any questions? I'm kind of scrolling down on everybody's faces to see if there's any hands up or that. Okay. Well, as far as next steps for the public, I know the library really likes to try to engage the public on what they feel is needed in the community. So there is that give and take. Does anyone have any objection to giving them the approval to start with those conversations?
No.
Go for it.
Please start.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Scott, for joining us tonight. We appreciate your time, and you can circle back around whenever Tracy gets back from vacation, and we can continue those conversations together.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and I will meet with Tracy as soon as she gets back, and I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you, Scott.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on the agenda. Now, the bulk of our conversation will be on the Recreation Center and its current status. And so we're going to kind of just start off by talking about our current costs and usage, just to kind of set the stage of where we're at right now. We've talked about this quite a lot in the past, but I feel like it's important to make sure everyone's on the same page before we kind of dive into what's next. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom. And Tom, do you want to share the screen, or do you want me to share what you need?
You can share, Mayor, as I'm not sure how to do that.
Tom, I'm just learning.
Maybe this would be a good time for Tom to have the learning experience.
I'll be happy to if you're more comfortable with that. That's fine.
Okay, let's see if I can figure this out. Okay. Okay.
Excellent. All right. Excellent. So within the information section on board docs,
You
there
please
was
make it a
two
little
financial
larger?
forecasts of the Recreation Fund. Excuse me?
We need to
If the mayor
increase that font.
Could make it a little larger. Thank you.
So thank you. So within the information section within the board docs, there was two financial forecasts, financial statements of the Recreation Fund. One labeled overall and the other one labeled by department. This is the one labeled overall, and this is the one that I will go over first. So I'll give you background information and I'll take any questions, of course. So this is a little bit similar, but again, a little bit unique to other financial forecasts that have been presented to City Council. So what this includes is actual information, revenue expenditures for 2019 and 2020. And then the forecast from 2021 through 2025. All this information is taken from the financial forecast that was presented to City Council last fall, just updated for the actual 2020 numbers, and then just presented in a different format than what you're used to at the budget work sessions. So on the top half of the income statement, financial forecasts are the revenue sources, which is pretty self-explanatory. You have your ice rink. There's within the recreation department, within the recreation function, there's 3 different departments that we budget. You have the ice rink, pool, and parks. So the top half of the income statement is the revenue sources for those 3 separate functions that we do. So you'll see actual 19, 20, and then the forecast 21 through 25. You may recall during the budget work session, due to the current pandemic and the economic implications, we formulated or forecasted more of a U-shaped recovery. So what that means, as a refresher, is for 2021, we budgeted 94% of what we initially budgeted going into 2020. So when we set the budget forecast in 2020, we set it at that point, and then we reformulated it last fall to take a percentage of what we initially estimated. So for 2021, it was 94%. And then 2022, it was 97%, and then 100% recovery in 2023. So that's really the main reason why you'll see total revenue in 21 go from 494,000 and to 510, and then the 526,000. That's the main reason as far as a U-shaped curve is with that. So are there any questions regarding the revenue estimates?
I
Okay.
had one quick question.
Yes.
So if someone were to get like the, year pool rec pass, is that in here, or is it divided between pool and rink, or the fees and permits?
So that's all within the pool.
Well, okay.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Any other questions on the revenue side? Okay. So then on the expenses, so we're going to have like 2 different columns for expenses. We're going to have the direct expenses, which are the direct costs, the costs that are allocated directly to the budget of these departments. And then I'll get into the utility a little bit after. So what you have here, the first 3 items are with personnel, benefits, and personnel part-time wages. So for the first 2, for the full-time wages and the full-time benefits, we currently have 6 full-time employees that work in the rec department. Currently, how we budget, and there's nothing incorrect of how we're doing it, we're allocating all those costs to the ice rink, right? So the ice rink, within the budget, it's absorbing all those costs, even though that the personnel may not necessarily work in the ice rink 100% of the time. So what I did, and I worked with Jack on this, is I asked him for an estimate of the percentages of the employees, their percentage that they allocate their work to the 3 different departments. So for instance, if Jack tells me, he's 40% ice rink, then I allocate his salary 40% to the ice rink, and then so forth to the pool, and then so forth going forward. So that's really what the first 2 sections are. So the personnel, first 2 rows are personnel, and then the benefits, meaning pension, Medicare, and medical insurance. And then you have your part-time wages, non-personnel. Those are the part-time workers directly attributed to the departments. Then you have your non-personnel costs. We added an inflationary cost, annual inflationary cost of 2% from 2022, which we set during the budget process. And then you have your capital costs as it's associated within the current 5-year capital improvement plan. So you'll see the ice rink, for instance. So you'll see 19 and 20, it's 603,000 and 555,000. Then it jumps up to 1.4 million this year. Much of that you'll see within the capital line item of $801,000. $751,000 of that is associated with the roof that we're currently doing. So that's why you'll see substantial cost increase, because it's a one-time cost, but we're capturing within this financial forecast. Then I did the same thing with the pool. Same methods, same approach. You'll see pool is pretty stagnant or pretty consistent from this 1920, and then it jumps up to 2021, which is mostly related to the capital. And then you have capital costs going forward, except for 2025. Any questions on that?
I just have a quick question on the capital, for the roof. So you just include that in our forecast for this year, even though we're going to finance it?
Correct. Yeah, and yes, good question. Yes, you can look at it either way. You can include it over the debt period that you're paying with it, or you can include it within the one-time lump payment of that. That's the way I chose to do it. It'll even out, but obviously, as you go through the forecast, but that's the method and the push there.
So for budgeting purposes moving forward, we will not be capturing what we're paying on the debt?
Within the ice rink, no.
Okay, thank you.
That'll really be within the bond retirement fund. And then the same approach with parks there. So then you'll see a total direct expenses of 1.5 million in 19 overall, 1.35 in 2020. It jumps up in 2021 mostly related to the ice rink. And then pretty consistent, about $2 million from 2022 through 2024. And then it goes down a little bit, mostly related to the capital costs in 25 at $1.6 million. Then the next column, or the next row, I should say. Excuse me.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
So in the forecast, clearly there are other capital projects that are really going to come from the capital fund. But we're still looking at it that it's coming from the rec center budget.
So for this, yes, it does come from the capital fund, but it also comes from the capital fund rec center budget at the same time. So it's capital fund and then rink or pool or whatever. So we're trying to capture all costs, not just general fund, but all costs associated with the rec center.
Thank you.
Then you'll have your net loss as far as the direct expenses as compared to the revenue. Generally, the last 2 years, about $900,000 or so loss. This year expected 2.2 again with ice rink roof. And then consistently going forward, anticipate a loss of $1.5 million, drops down to $1 million in 2025. Estimated $1 million loss in 2025. So you'll see a consistent pattern of well over $1 million going forward of an annual loss, which means an annual subsidy that really the income tax revenue is paying for in a lot of ways. Then you have the cost recovery rate. So what this tells you, for those that may not be familiar with the term, is that what percentage of the revenue of the costs are paid for by the revenues associated with the department. So for instance, for 2019, 40% of the costs were paid by revenues associated with the department. So pretty much by user fees for the rec center. So that was that. Does anybody have any questions on that? So then you'll see 40% in 19 down to 31%, much of it COVID related in 2020. Then you'll see a decline to 18%, much of that related to the ice rink roof. And then consistently going forward, the cost recovery rate anywhere from about 25% to 35%, which is, so that means 25 to 35% of the costs are paid for by the user fee with the rec. Then the following row are the utility expenses. We all know that it takes utilities and additional costs to run a rec center. So, so the associated utility costs from 19 to 20, about 280,000, 291,000, estimated 297,000 for this year, and then consistently over 300,000 for the years going forward. Then the next row is the net loss, capturing net loss all inclusive. So what this captures is a net loss from the above row, adding or deducting, depending on how you look at it, the utility expenses associated with the recreation. So you'll see a net loss of 1.2 million the last 2 fiscal years, going up to 2.5 million estimated this year, and then consistently around $1.8 million for the next 3 years, going down to $1.4 million in 2025. And then the cost recovery rate, taking into account the utility expenditures that I just discussed. This does not incorporate any kind of support services that other departments may give the rec center, such as finance. If I were to say what percentage of my time is allocated to finance department, allocated to rec department, it's not much, but those kind of costs are not associated with that. It wouldn't change the financial thing, so to speak, of the rec center. Are there any other questions on this? Then Mayor, if you can take it to the next document.
This is the next document, correct?
I was going to go over the department one briefly.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So this is all, thank you. So this is all the same information, but presented in different ways. This one is by department. So you'll see the ice rink, overall net loss of about 460,000 last 2 years, jumps up to $1.3 million estimated this year, and then down to 550,000 and so forth, around 560, jumps up to 660,000 in 2024. And then the associated cost recovery rate with that department. Then you'll see the same thing with the pools down below. And then the same thing with the parks. Parks is the simplistic one for the most part, but so you'll see it just presented a different way by department in this change. Are there any questions? Okay. If you think of any other questions after this, feel free to email me. Thank you.
Okay, Jack's gonna go over some membership and some comparisons now.
Okay. Everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. So you'll see in front of you, it's a membership comparison. We chose two other communities to compare on this chart, and I'll kind of explain that. So the city of Seven Hills, the reason why we chose Seven Hills was they have approximately 11,000 residents, which obviously is close to what we have here in Brooklyn. Another thing with Seven Hills is they've relied pretty heavily on Parma Heights non-resident members, as you can see by the chart there. The square footage of their facility is roughly the size of, if we were to look to build new, that's roughly the size of about what we would be looking at, roughly 45 to 50,000 square foot. And they do rely pretty heavily on their senior membership, which is another reason why we chose Seven Hills. Fairview Park, although the population is higher, there's about 16,000 residents in Fairview Park. Their facility is quite larger. It's about 93,000 square foot. They are kind of a goal, I guess, that we might look to shoot for. So in the recreation industry, they're considered, very successful as far as membership percentages and things like that. So, those two communities we really wanted to compare. You can kind of see them alongside our numbers there. So I'll just kind of go over the highlights of the chart. And again, this isn't all inclusive of every membership type we have or every pass we sell, but these are really the numbers that kind of drive the bulk of your membership revenue on a yearly basis. So starting in the blue section up top, as you can see, Seven Hills has about 5,600 members, Fairview Park 8,300, and Brooklyn has about 1,582. Now keep in mind, those are paid annual or monthly members. So for Brooklyn, for instance, those do not include our residents or non-residents for that matter that just have the membership cards, the ones that drop in daily. So you can see Seven Hills and Fairview are doing really well with regards to the size of their population. In the yellow section, you can see the number of senior members in the community among all those different categories. So again, a large percentage of Seven Hills members are seniors, about 4,000 out of the 5,600 total. Fairview Park, about half, 4,000 out of about 8,000. And we're just about half as well. About 800 of our total membership is from seniors there. So again, a large population of the people coming in our doors, especially, is that senior population. And as you can see from all three cities as well, the Silver Sneakers members are a big draw. Total annual memberships versus total monthly memberships. Obviously, as you would expect, there's a bigger percentage of annual memberships just because of the monthly membership charge. We try to make that tempting enough for people to purchase the annual memberships. And that kind of goes across the board for all cities. Membership revenue in 2019, and then we look back to, we kind of disregarded 2020 because of COVID. So this was everybody's last year in full operation. 2019, you can see the three different membership revenues there. And then the drop in revenue, which we're actually the highest out of the three. So that kind of paints a picture there. We do have a lot of annual identification card holders that don't buy annual memberships, but they do come in the facility on a drop-in basis. And then in the pink section there, you can kind of see a kind of a 3-year forecast there, or a trend from all three communities. So you see where we kind of stand in that. The jump from 2018 to 2019, we really couldn't pin anything hard down other than we really did try to promote and offer the memberships a little more to Parma Heights, Lindale, and we did have a big jump in our Silver Sneakers membership from 2018 to 2019. So it was pretty consistent up until then, and we did have a big jump, which was good. Nothing, no outlier really. We just really try to push the partner members, in that regard. So, but you can see the other communities stayed fairly consistent with their membership revenue. And then you can kind of compare that to total revenue. You look at Seven Hills is at about $1 million in total revenue annually. And that's across the board. That's for everything, for membership, programming, rentals, for everything. Fairview Park is kind of the anomaly there. Their numbers look inflated. If you kind of look below, it kind of explains why they are. They receive quite a bit of subsidy annually, both through their dedicated income tax money, the $2.5 million that was instituted when they built the Gemini Center back in the early 2000s. And they also have a parks fund, which is kind of rolled into their general revenue of about almost $500,000 there. So, they're subsidized by about $3 million almost annually. And then you can see our revenue, our total revenue to the right there, which Tom just kind of touched on. Those numbers might differ slightly, but overall, they should be pretty much the same. So you can kind of see the comparison there with total revenue. The orange or the dark orange column there, I think is a good telltale for all three communities. I've said since day one, when I got here, and it's something that, everybody in recreation kind of preaches, is that, any kind of successful facility, whether it's public, private, in any industry for recreation, your membership's going to be your lifeblood. And if you don't have that consistent, solid revenue coming in from your annual memberships, it's hard to get ahead and generate that money elsewhere. So you can see that both cities are 40%, 50% on an annual basis with regards to their membership revenue as a part of their total revenue. And you can see where we're at about 14 to 18%. So a lot of work to do there, in my estimate. Whatever route we decide to go, memberships has to be a priority of ours. If we're going to build any kind of community center or renovate ours, that has to be a priority. And pretty much anybody in the profession would tell you that. The full-time employees, that's just a snapshot, just as to kind of paint a clearer picture of what's happening in these facilities. So we are kind of right in the middle of those three communities. We're the only one with an ice rink, though, which had its own challenges and different operations than the others. So you could just kind of see what kind of staff all three communities have there. And then the membership rates on the bottom. So again, these aren't all inclusive of every single category we have. We wouldn't have enough time or room to talk about those, but these are the highest generating revenue categories as far as memberships go. And you can kind of see we're pretty consistent with the other two communities. Keep in mind that Fairview Park, is obviously has such a large subsidy, they can keep their membership rates very, very low. They didn't want to gouge the community any more than they already have. Not that they were gouging them, but they didn't want to charge the community any more than they had because of all the subsidies. So I think their membership rates for an adult resident has gone up $10 in the last 10 years, 12 years or so. But you can see kind of where we're at. I mean, just to paint the picture, we're charging $120 a year annually for an adult to basically use our pool, use our small workout areas, which is the same price as Fairview. I get there's a subsidy there, but that just kind of paints that picture of the value of what our residents are getting. Seven Hills is a little bit higher than us, but again, they have the full community center with gyms included for the residents to use. So that's just kind of a snapshot of some of the resident rates for those communities. And then on the left there again are just some notes to clarify, our total revenue on this form does not reflect our ID card revenue, which we started cracking down on in 2019. We started really going back and finding all those members that weren't renewing their ID cards. So we did generate a few $1,000s more off that. Silver Sneakers has held solid, which is included in the $115K revenue. And that's actually important to note for us. $54,000 of our $115,000 yearly membership revenue is from Silver Sneakers. So, and we issue about 800 ID cards annually for usage of our facility. So again, that's just kind of a snapshot, which kind of shows you a little bit on usage of those three communities. Again, I think Seven Hills is probably a little more similar with regards to demographics, the number and age group and of people that we bring in. Fairview is kind of that, if we were to go a large community center route, obviously we're not going to get to those numbers, but we can definitely scale back percentage wise, with our size community and demographics that way. So if you guys have any questions about that, let me know. I'm sure you've hashed this out multiple times over the years, but to me in the rec industry, these were important figures that we felt we wanted to bring to your attention.
May I add something, Jack?
Sure.
I think it's important for everyone to understand that Fairview, basically that was a joint city school project from the beginning, hence the name Gemini, and the residents approved an increase in the income tax in order to fund what you're talking about, what they collect. That was on the ballot and the residents, approved a tax increase to have this beautiful amenity.
Yeah, that is correct. That was done, I think, a few years actually before they started even construction on the facility. And then it is important to note, kind of along those lines, they did also appropriate that $500,000 they're getting in that parks fund is actually directly from property tax, which was originally dedicated just to parks, but they've since kind of rolled that into their just normal operating budget. So.
Jack, I have one question.
Sure.
Middleburg Heights also has a portion of their income tax put aside for the rec center. Am I correct on that too?
I'm not 100% sure, Kevin. It could be. There's some cities that have, some percentage that go to them once they're collected. A little different than Fairview, though. It was dedicated directly to that recreation fund.
Middleburg Heights did raise their income tax for their rec community center.
I don't know what that number is off the top of my head.
Yeah, you know what that number is, Kathy?
I'm not sure. I know that when they did it, they had low income tax rate to begin with. And I want to say it went up 0.5% for their rec community center.
The city income tax was at 1.5. I remember that. I don't know if it went to 1.75. And then I thought a quarter more for the rec center. I'm not sure, which equaled out to 2, or it might even be higher than that now.
Anybody else?
Thank you. And just a couple more things that we would like to review. Going back to the 2016 needs assessment, the rec center was identified to need about $8 million in repairs. And Jack just, he took a look at what has been done off that needs assessment and just kind of going back to that needs assessment. That needs assessment was essentially just fixing those things that need to be fixed. That's not modifying any programming. That's not improving the center in any way. This is just basic repairs to maintain the building. So Jack, do you want to give an update on the current status of those repairs?
Sure. So of the 8 million, we're checking off the list about 750,000 for the ice rink roof. I believe in the assessment, it called for about almost 1.2 to 1.3 million dollars for the entire building. So we are addressing the rink portion of the roof this year. And then as part of capital as well, we are installing a new outdoor pool, sand filter, and boiler. So all together, which were both on the needs assessment. We did also address with the aid of the NOPEC grant last year, the lighting in the pool, exterior lighting on the outside of the pool, and also exterior lighting in the parking lots, which were all part of the needs assessment as well. So all told, we've invested or going to be investing about $1 million of that 8 already to check off some of those items.
Thank you, Jack. And then one more aspect we'd like to talk about, just to remind everybody, is some of the feedback that we received from residents over the last couple years. And that starts with when we sent out a citywide survey in 2017. Some of those priority areas that residents wanted, improved youth recreation programs, maintenance and parents of the recreation center, improved senior recreation programs, indoor pool and programs and activities offered by the recreation center. Some of the median priorities, the fees charged in the ice rink. Some questions that we asked at that time: have you visited the rec center in the last 12 months? 58% of our residents said no. Of the 43% that said yes, 43% said yes. So that wasn't essentially for a membership that was for monthly or yearly. So, the big question is, would you support renovating the recreation center? 29% were supportive in some way, 37% not supportive, and 35% unknown or neutral at that time. This was a few years ago. So some updated information from last year, or the 2019, when we did the master plan survey. 44% of residents, and just to recall that these master plan survey was heavily focused on seniors. We saw that it kind of scaled over to seniors a lot. So we had to do some reach out to younger people through focus groups, but this is just purely for the survey purposes. 44% said we need to renovate or expand the recreation center. 35.2% said to maintain the existing recreation center. And some amenities that I think we all know, we've been hearing for a long time. People are looking for indoor walking track, place for cardio equipment and strength training and fitness studios, senior activities, and maintaining that indoor and outdoor pool. Those were the highest desired amenities for a recreation center. Some of the things that we obviously don't have are the indoor walking track, adequate cardio and strength training equipment spaces in our current recreation center. We do have a fitness studio, but it's on the second floor, difficult to reach currently. So just taking that look back, just so we can kind of set the stage of a good dialogue moving forward. We have, different options to kind of go through, well, what we can do from here. That first one, maintaining the current recreation center. And just as we go back to the needs assessment, that is not changing any programming, not adding any of those amenities asked for. That is just maintaining the current building and the two main services that we offer right now, an ice rink and an auditorium. our second option is to renovate or adjust and expand the recreation center. And I'm going to turn it over to Jack because he's really kind of taken the reins of looking into options going from here.
Okay, so the renovation option, we had GPD came out with Mo Darwish and Mark Soplak, which is kind of their one of their head architects. They came out to visit the facility, and we walked it, went over it kind of with a fine tooth comb, and Mark didn't pull any punches. Went over our building, and the general consensus was after it was all said and done, that the building itself, the structure of the building, was actually in very good condition. And, he was not hesitant to say that, it would last another 30 to 40 years, without a natural disaster of any sort. The mechanical inside, obviously a different story that needs to be updated, which is addressed in the needs assessment, ADA compliancy, just overall energy efficiency, appearance, restrooms, all of that stuff would need to be updated, which I think we all know that. But the structure of the building was sound. And that was actually confirmed by, they brought another architect in, Rodwell King. He's kind of an expert in the recreation field, building community centers, field houses, things like that. And he pretty much confirmed that, that the structure is sound. It's a great space to do some things in, whether that's repurpose, add on the back, whatever we decide to do. But it's a viable structure that, they really didn't feel we need to move on from in one way or the other. So that was actually good to hear. Now, what we do with that facility, if we decide to renovate, that's the question. There's a lot of options we can do. So obviously, the elephant in the room sometimes is, what do we do with the ice rink area? Do we keep it, add on the back, add gym space, or, we have this great space in there already, do we repurpose that ice rink and turn that into a multi-use court, basketball, volleyball, tennis, pickleball, just general, activity area? That is definitely an option, as I think the architects would say. GPD, is ready to go on getting us a proposal for that, if that's the direction we want to go. There is a cost associated with that, which we can go into a little more detail a little later. But I think everybody involved with those conversations from the structural end and from the programming end, feel that the facility is very viable for a long time to come if we decide to renovate or even keep an ice rink. But I think there's a lot of options there. If we were to decide to move on from the ice rink and create that into a multi-use indoor recreation center, essentially, and add on to the back possibly, and make that a fitness center, create some meeting rooms, maybe even add a senior component somewhere in the building. There are options, and the benefit to that would be that we wouldn't have to invest all that capital up front. We can phase that in over time, do that as we see fit, prioritize those things and tackle those as we're able to financially. And obviously, if we were to move on from the ice rink, it would save us a lot in utility costs, getting rid of the ice plant. Obviously, we would lose revenue from the ice. However, you can generate that in other ways. Obviously, our membership should increase, and we'd still be renting our facility. You'd have the courts to rent to generate some revenue. It would still be a regional facility as well in that regard, holding tournaments, renting space, and that thing. Which, obviously the item 3 there is increased membership revenue. As you can see from the chart that we had before, it's going to be imperative, whatever we do, we're going to have to get more people in the doors. And to make it any sort of value for them, for residents, we have to have more amenities, as the mayor mentioned. And this is really a great space to do that. Again, whether we repurpose, add on, whatever we decide to do. But I think there's a lot of possibilities with that building, which is pretty exciting. But again, GPD is kind of ready to give us a proposal on that if we decide to go that route. But I think, I think the question that needs to be asked and that we need to figure out, that first domino, is the ice rink. Is the ice rink going to be a long-term amenity for us, or do we consider moving on from the ice rink? And that's not a question for me to answer, or necessarily that's for the community and council to answer. So I'm definitely open to, I'd love to hear what everybody has to say about that, unless you want to move on to the new building.
Jack, I would just continue going. I mean, the other option is to build a new wellness center. We've explored a private-public partnership. Originally talking to University Hospital, they're still interested in a partnership, but it's not to the degree of where we would need it to be in order to move forward with them as a solid partner. But there are those options of having a private-public partnership where we have someone pay for a new building and we are leasing it back. That is always an option on the table. It's not going to look like our current facility. It would be much smaller with a cost of around $16 million with the amenities of courts, cardio, locker room, fitness, indoor pool and track. So, kind of doing that assessment, that's what we could, through membership and payment, be able to sustain and have membership pay for. When you do a private-public partnership, you could, own it at the end of it, but you're not putting all that capital cost up front. Moving forward, there's also the other cost of demolishing. If you do not keep your current facility, so it's, about $400,000 that would be, which I think is sort of low, but this is what they're telling me based upon state numbers, to demolish the existing facility. And then, that option of, do we do a new wellness center and then keep the ice rink? So there are tons of options on the table. And I think at this point, we're trying to start a dialogue, because I'm not quite sure that, putting $7 million in our current facility with doing nothing to improve it is going to get us where we need to be long-term. All that is fixing what we have. It's not addressing our membership issue. It's not addressing what residents are looking for. So we're just trying to put everything on the table to figure out what's next. So if you want to talk about some of those options, I'd, open the floor up to everybody to see if anyone has any thoughts.
I'd like to clarify something. So the demolition of the existing facility for $382,000, that's to demolish the ice rink and keep the natatorium?
That's for the cost of the entire facility, supposedly. That's they gave me a price per square footage times by 85,000, and that's what that would be.
Including demolishing the natatorium.
Correct.
So if we went with the wellness center, that means we would no longer have the indoor pool, or no, because it says indoor pool under that.
Keep the ice rink. I mean, that's still an option. That's just you could have a wellness center and then demolish the auditorium.
I'm trying to get some clarification on, under new facility, you have 45,000 square feet, 16 million, but then you have amenities and you've got indoor pool. That means our existing indoor pool?
No, that would be part of the new facility.
A new one? Okay, thank you. I agree that, first of all, we've had an issue with, trying to get people in our facilities for a long time. And basically it's a vicious circle, because we don't have what they're looking for, which is, all the things that we have on our list here tonight. And it's nothing that we don't know. But I agree that I don't think it's worth putting all this money into the facility when we're just going to kind of continue on that vicious circle where we're not getting people in because we're not offering the community what they're looking for as far as the cardio, expanded cardio, courts, and indoor walking were really the biggest things. And then of course, place for exercise, different types of exercise rooms. And so I agree that it's not worth putting $7 million into the facility. And at the end of the day, we are not going to be able to increase our membership because we're not going to be able to offer more.
Mayor,
Oh,
got a question.
oh, go ahead.
Question I got, Mayor, is I agree too about the $7 million and not increasing the membership. Where does YMCA fit into this? I know we were talking about that. Are they doing anything are they interested into getting involved with this facility? Have you talked to them?
I talked to the YMCA a few years back. The issue with the YMCA is that you pay for the capital costs. So we're paying for the facility and they're running it. So we could save on operating costs long-term, but we're putting most of our recreational services into their hands from there for them to maintain, but we still would have to pay for the facility to be built. There's also, I believe, if I could speak for a public, I think there's an overwhelming feeling of keeping something that's ours. That's what I've seen over time. You know, I tried to do a focus group at that time, and that was sort of what I was hearing. People want new, but they're afraid to think about it, somebody else running it. But I think that I think it's important to note what Jack says. We have a regional facility, and that's not changing. We're a 4.5 square mile city with 11,000 residents surrounded by Cleveland and Parma. We have to accept that we're still going to remain a regional facility no matter what we do, and how we structure that and what that looks like. But at this point, the question is our current regional facility serving our residents? So, and their needs and wants.
Mayor, the question I have, has YMCA worked and partnered with other cities and made it big, membership increasing and size increasing the facility and the whole structure of it?
So YMCA has worked with other cities. Warrensville Heights would be a good example of that. However, also North Royalton would be a good example of that. They have also learned from their mistakes too. And that's why they've structured their deals differently. They put more capital money in, and now they're not offering that because they realized that they were at a loss. It's sort of like ice rink facilities. When the recession hit and you had people buying up the ice rinks, like in Lakewood, in Strongsville, those particular cities got better deals. And those people buying the facilities learned from their mistakes, and those deals are not the same as they were before. I've been approached multiple times, and I will entertain any offer about, you know, options to put on the table. But if at the end of the day, I'm still paying the capital costs and everything associated with the facility, why am I turning it over for someone else to run? It doesn't make sense. So, you know, my conversation with YMCA did not make sense any longer, because if we're going to build a facility and pay for the capital costs, why aren't we just doing it on our own and running it on our own? They can offer something. They can offer some things, but long term, we lose some of our control.
So when
And
you
how-
refer to a public-private partnership, what type of entity are you referring to?
An investor. They essentially, you know, they would make that money off of the deal. They'd pay for it. We'd be paying back debt to them, and then at the end of that, whatever that time frame, we could buy it back, or we could buy out the facility. But it's essentially covering the cost of building the facility up front, and they're writing it off because they're a private entity.
And how does that compare with issuing our own debt?
As far as what?
What would the advantage be to go that way with an investor versus issuing bonds, us issuing bonds?
That we could cover the cost. Right now, we're going to have a substantial amount of debt on our books because of the city hall and police station. We're not in a position to take on two large projects like this, well, at least comfortably. Tom, do you want to interject here?
Yes, thank you. So I agree. So as you know, with the debt issuance, there's no cost recovery there. You're just issuing debt and paying it over long term. There's no one else giving you money to subsidize that debt payment. We all know that we're expected to take out $25 million or so related to the Civic Center. And I'm not sure at this point now, additional research has to be done yet, but I'm not sure at this point if we can take on additional debt and not have a revenue source to at least pay back partially, if not fully, the costs associated with it. So, you know, we're anticipating $25 million. That there's no new tax revenue associated with that. It's just within the city's geo capacity within the city's current financial forecast budgeting. I'm not sure if we can do that for another $10 million or whatever the cost may be for renovation of the rec center.
I understand. And also how, let's say, I also know we like to look at what our debt ratio is and we want to make sure we keep up our bond rating. But how would owing an investor for that money differ as far as that goes, or does it differ? Because it is still something we're obligated to pay.
Yes, it's something we're obligated to pay. It's not geo debt, so the ratings agencies may look at it a little bit differently as well, which is a good point, and that may work into our favor.
Thank you.
Mary, you were about to say something with Kevin was talking. Do you want to?
Well, it's just my little opinion here. I mean, we're building this fabulous civic center, fabulous eventually, and possibly a beautiful library. It just seems the whole concept. I personally don't think that, you know, you go to some of these cities, they have fabulous state-of-the-art gyms and rec centers. You know, I always felt a little bit not jealous, a little inferior, you know, because I compared ours to others. And I know you shouldn't do that. I realize that. I realize that's not right. But it sounds to me very intriguing with the wellness center. I do think we need to update, you know, and I don't know if it's a good idea putting money in. It's like almost putting Band-Aids on, you know, something's going to keep going wrong with our place. It seems like putting Band-Aids on by just repairing and putting all that money into it. That's just my opinion. I'm hoping somewhere down the line we could look at something new. That's just how I feel. So I just thought I'd throw that in, you know. If there's some way we can somehow work it out, that would be wonderful for our city, I think. That's it. So.
And Mayor, and that's what I've talked about before, just to piggyback what Mary's saying, having a brand new facility to the left of that building, and now you're going to put one across the street. To have a rec center built, what, 70s, 30, 40 years old, in the middle of all of it, it just doesn't rhyme with me. So I don't know if we can do something with the outside of the front of it. But again, you're putting money into a facility, like, again, Band-Aids would probably be the best term. Let me ask you this. Because I know Cleveland Clinic got involved in a lot of this. Where does Cleveland Clinic fit in? Have you talked to them too?
We have not talked to Cleveland Clinic, I'm sorry, specifically. So what's happening now with COVID is, you know, a lot of these hospitals are capital light right now. They'll rent space from recreation facilities and also put their logo on the front. And here we go into, you know, number 4, sponsorships. I mentioned this during the when we were talking about the Civic Center and you know, John M. Coyne on our recreation center, and whether we could integrate John M. Coyne under the current facility that we're building and take a look at changing things from there. Jack, do you want to, I'm going to pull up our plans from the Civic Center. Would you mind going over sponsorships that are currently taking place in Seven Hills and the Gemini Center?
Sure. So Seven Hills has a annual sponsorship with University Hospitals. They actually rent space in their facility, and they also pay them for naming rights annually, and they get $65,000 total. 25 of that goes to naming rights, and 40 of that goes to rent, essentially. And then Fairview Park has a similar agreement with the Cleveland Clinic. Actually, it's an orthopedic rehab room, which used to be actually 2 aerobics rooms that they've since turned into one large orthopedic rehab room. And they get approximately $100,000 annually as a lease from them.
And Jack,
So
would you?
there
would
are
you
those
be-
options that we can continue to have those conversations, but as far as doing a full-on private-public partnership where they're paying more than just having rehab and a room and a sponsorship, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen with the clinic. It's not going to happen with UH right now. It's not going to happen with Metro. We just, based upon those conversations, we just understand that, but we could have that option of doing something like Seven Hills is doing or Gemini Center is, but that naming rights would go onto the building of the recreation center as well as having that space interior. So those are the options, and that's why I did approach the subject of looking at the civic or the new building and having some kind of dedicated space to still honor John M. Coyne in maybe the plaza design, and remove the building and have that other source of revenue option coming in for the recreation center. So we talk about how do we increase membership to defer costs? How do we take advantage of sponsorships and opportunities to minimize some of our costs? So those are the things that we'll have to continue to look at going forward. And I think the big question is how do we provide residents those services? So I think some of the questions that we're asking City Council to answer tonight are, what are your feelings on the ice rink and keeping them, and how do you want to have that conversation with the public? Because we do have the opportunity to maybe convert our current space into something where it includes that kind of workout facility, that track, and that gym, which would hopefully ensure that we could have those annual and monthly memberships that are attracting people to places like the Gemini Center and to Seven Hills. And then, what is people's feelings about sponsorships and the removal of John M. Coyne's name from the Recreation Center and honoring him in a different capacity with our new building? So we have that opportunity to keep exploring those relationships with a hospital and add on that sponsorship and maybe create that room. So at the end of the day, we could talk about, yes, it costs a lot to build a building and it costs a lot to renovate it, but the opportunity to reduce some of the costs associated with what we have now by having membership that people are paying 12 months to have, could go a long way. But we have to provide them the services to get them to want to have those memberships at that facility.
I have a question, or two questions actually, for Jack. It's a little hard for us to envision how the renovation would all work. I don't know if there's been any specific discussions on what it would look like, but basically you're saying use the rink space and then add on something else to the back of the building. Is that accurate?
Generally speaking, yes. Your rink space would be your multi-use court area. And then on the north side of the building, and we wouldn't actually even have to get even to the road to do, there's actually quite a bit of space back there. Plenty of room, I think, to add a fitness center, to add some meeting rooms, possibly to incorporate senior programming. And then once you start moving those other things around, that opens up doors. If we relocate the current cardio room and weight room, then we can turn those into something else. We can repurpose those. So I think, yes, essentially, the large ice rink area would be your multi-use area, and then you could add on to the north side of the building with your additional space. And just talking to some of the architects that came in the building, they think one way or another we can get a walking track in there too.
That was going to be my next question, that the indoor walking is very important to the community.
Yeah, they were, the two architects that I met with, they kind of got excited about the prospect of actually renovating that building just because of the size it is. And, we have some amenities in that building that, like the bleacher seating, the concession stand, those are items that if you're building a field house nowadays, or even a gym, those break the bank. You don't see any field houses or gyms that have those. So, I think the building is a great space to do a lot of things with, especially if we wanted to go that route. So,
Well, and I think it's very good news that they believe that that building has 30 to 40 more years left. I mean, clearly it was well built.
Yeah, they were, when they both walked in, I think they both had the same look on their face, like, what are we doing here? And then as we walked through the facility, they realized it was mostly mechanical. They were very surprised that, how well the building was kept and how sound it was. I mean, from the inside of the roof, not the exterior, but from the beams all the way down to the floor with, they were pretty surprised by that.
Mhm. And my next question is, do we have data on exactly who is using the rink? And I mean, I know that we know the schools that are there for hockey and everything, but as far as like, the different groups, I'm not talking about the high schools, the different groups, like how many residents are using it? I mean, I know we have the Learn to Skate and our youth hockey. So do we have that data?
Yeah, we have it. We can get updated data fairly quickly as soon as you would need it. It's not a large number, as I'm guess you would all guess.
Right.
We can get that updated data whenever you need it.
Mhm. Thank you.
Hey, Jack, quick question. I know with the city, with the rink, it's supposed to be, hopefully you try to break even or get as close to break even as, instead of being a for-profit business. But what is it, in the past month or 2 months, LA Fitness, which was a nice facility off of Tiedemann, they've changed ownership. Some of these other chains have changed ownership. Is there like a trend or something on the private sector with fitness that, you see that's a problem, or, it kind of floats over into our side of things?
Not really. If anything, it could benefit us. I mean, we might get more people from it. I mean, generally speaking, the people that want to go to a community center and work out, they're I guess more, social fitness people. The people that go to private fitness centers in general, from my experience, are a little more of the serious, kind of bulk work, people that want to work out in bulk. So if anything, I think that would actually help us in getting some more people in the door. I mean, we've had, during COVID, for instance, we had a good amount of people, Silver Sneakers people, that went over to Gold's Gym and some other places where some of our instructors were offering classes while we were shut down towards the tail end. And they're very happy to be coming back. The atmosphere is just not for them. So I think for us, I mean, I don't think that would affect us much. We might actually gain from that.
Okay.
I'd like to go back to Katie's original question of what we think as council about the ice skating rink, and also how it might be perceived, or how we could get the public involved in what they think. First of all, I do think it's a dinosaur, and the facility could be put to better use for more people, and also more frequently used. And one of the things that I think is a perception in our community is many people perceive that the ice rink is a big moneymaker. And I think just by helping people understand that we're not making a huge amount of revenue from groups, teams, tournaments, renting out the facilities and using it. And I think, like Katie mentioned, we like our own ownership. We like the local control in Brooklyn. And I think that perception of the ice skating rink could be changed if we, got the word out that it's not a moneymaker for our rec center, and that we really don't have a lot of locals, residents using it. People just probably are not taking ice skating lessons. I mean, I listen to my kids. Nobody tells me they're going to the rec to take ice skating lessons. So I don't think we see very many of our residents using it. And I think getting the word out that it's not the moneymaker that many of us thought it was would help.
Anybody else on council have any kind of feedback on the recreation center? So we do have an option. Like Jack said, GPD gave us a proposal to do a conceptual look at what we can do. Looking at programming, look how we can modify our current facility. Jack, what was the quote? It was
28,000.
28,000. That could be a starting point of where we can continue this conversation and reuse the current facility. As far as sponsorships go, I really haven't heard any feedback, so I'm curious what you have on the screen right now is a conceptual plaza design at the last stroke. Just so you know, this is still early, but obviously this is going to be a nice event space that we're going to try to create. Landscaping just got involved recently, so we could have this event space here that has a memorial area where we can honor John M. Coyne in this plaza, and have that opportunity for that sponsorship if we choose to move that way. But it would be a conversation that we'll have to have sooner than later if this is the route we're going to go, so we can do it justice and make sure that it's integrated into that design in whatever capacity that is.
I think that's a logical idea especially to open up the sponsorships. I know I was a resident when the rec center was named in his honor, but it was more like, something, we wanted something named. Our parks were already named. And so the rec center just seemed logical. We didn't want a street named after him. So now with the new facility, I think it seems very logical that meeting area would be a nice place to honor him. And I know I wouldn't be upset about the change. I think a lot of people wouldn't be upset about the change. But maybe I'm remembering incorrectly.
So when we had these discussions, there was never any idea about naming our existing city hall. And basically it came down to the senior center or the rec center, and council asked me to approach the family and to get, their take on what the preference was. I mean, it was mostly Mayor Coyne's, but there were other family members present at the meeting also. And there was a consensus that because we really did have one of the first ice rinks, rec centers in the area, that that was kind of, I'm trying to think how to explain it. That was their preference because it was something unique, to build way back then in the 70s. So that's really how that came about. I understand that, we are looking to increase revenue, and we would be foolish if there is an opportunity to have ongoing significant revenue relating to naming rights. I just want to go on the record saying whatever we do, I think it has to be an appropriate, honor, memorial or honor. It has to be appropriate. Not a plaque on the wall, in other words.
So any feedback on that you don't have to do it tonight, but feedback on that, if that's the route I would definitely need. So I'm not going in one direction and at the end of the day, I did something wrong. So feedback I would definitely need from people. So
have there already been discussions on ideas on?
No, this is completely preliminary. We talked about the plaza as a whole, but there, Bowen is looking for my guidance here, and at this point, we haven't even talked about it that much. So we're not to that point, but it's gonna go fast, and I just don't want to miss that opportunity to integrate it when we have the opportunity to do it now.
I also will say that I think it is worth spending the 28,000 to see what we could get through a renovation and addition. I do have a question though. How is this going to relate to any capital improvements we may need relating to the natatorium? I mean, I know that that is much newer than the ice rink and everything, but we would keep all that the same and then just focus our, renovations and addition just solely on the ice rink, correct?
Well, I mean, actually, when we walked the facility, the thought process was a complete renovation. So that would include eventually, the pool. I mean, we would want to look at this again as a rec center, as a community center. So that would have to include the pool. So as part of these renovations, whatever would need to be done to the pool, whether aesthetics or mechanical, those would be part of this, as part of that study. So, I mean, we want to make this a cohesive building, a rec center, not just renovate the rink and worry about the pool later. That I think that has to be part of it.
So, hey, Jack, so the way you're talking about the renovations now, anything to the structural shell is good, but anything inside is kind of like up in the air a little bit.
I mean, mechanical, the HVAC equipment is old.
Yeah.
So, even talking to K Company, they have ideas about making it more energy efficient. So you wouldn't even necessarily may need to replace everything. A lot of it's just adding on to and making things more efficient or replacing pieces and parts. The pool equipment's getting older. So like Kathy mentioned, we have to address that. The ice rink equipment, that could go, and that's a huge expense that if we were to keep the building, we wouldn't have to renovate that. So it's a lot of mechanical. You mentioned interior, it's a lot of mechanical, lighting upgrades, adding an elevator, to make it ADA compliant. So there's a good amount, but it's not, insurmountable. And again, we can phase those things in as we see fit.
On the needs assessment, what you and Katie mentioned, the 7 million, 8 million, can you kind of refresh us sometimes with the list of exactly what was what?
There's a list of probably about 75 things on there, and they're all 1, 5, 7-year priorities. Off the top of my head, no. The roof was one of the bigger ones. Updating the HVAC was another large one. And then upgrading like just the electrical in the building, getting that up to code was another big one. So we've already addressed one of the larger ones with the roof.
Okay. I was just thinking of what's the renovations more structural compared to, like you say, the mechanical inside. Because if you
there are some structural things on the needs assessment. I mean, if you want to consider structural, like, renovating restrooms and updating those and updating the aesthetics in the building, so I guess those can be considered structural to a point, but the majority of the big cost items were mechanical.
Okay. But even if the restrooms, start doing a whole renovation, you're going to be moving all that around. So it's like,
yeah.
Live and.
I mean, don't get me wrong. A renovation is not going to be cheap. We're not talking nickel and dime. It's going to be, like you're building a new facility almost. But the beauty of that is we'll have a much larger facility.
Right. Okay.
Is there any thought on reworking the front entrance at all?
Yeah, that would be a major component of the renovations. Now, whether that would stay in the front or slide over by the pool, maybe, we'd have some options there, but that would be a big component. Yes.
Thank you.
Hey, Jack, there were a couple energy efficient things that I brought up in the past, and it might be something to look at. One of them is how we're heating that pool. There are facilities, and I'd have to bring all the paperwork from a few years back, heating that pool. And I believe, if I can remember, and I brought it up on the rec board about a generator running a gas line into the generator, producing electricity for the entire rec, and the heat off that generator actually heating that entire pool. Now, there's rec centers that went that route. I don't know about any around here, but throughout the US. And I'm gonna have to look up that paperwork because that's something I think we should look at, energy efficient wise.
Yeah,
Your
it could be.
thoughts?
I'm not familiar with that at all, to be honest with you. I'd have to really talk to some people about that, but I know for a fact that K Company and Tempest, they would be, or whoever we choose to do it, would be willing to help us find programs like that.
I'd say, at the end of the day, Jack's right, even to do a renovation, it's going to cost a substantial amount of money. Tom, my conservative finance director, would say that, we don't know where we're going to be financially. So Tom, do you want to talk about looking at what a millage is and an increase? Not saying we're doing this, but I want to put everything on the table as options. If, we do decide that we're going to go to the renovation route and we're going to do it over time, it's going to take a long time to get there. So the other flip side is to look at millage and look at that renovation up front in one bulk move and get it all done. And hopefully that membership increases. We could get some of that sponsorship and kind of recoup those costs quickly and not keep it on there. So Tom, do you want to cover any of that?
Sure. So I did some analysis as far as 1 mil increase, what it would cost a taxpayer and how much revenue it would generate on an annual basis and how much revenue it would generate over a 20-year period, which is basically, if we were to do a renovation, we would issue debt, capitalized, paid back over pretty much a 20-year period, is my belief at this time. So my analysis based upon current property tax rates, for every 1 mil increase to the taxpayer, it would be a $35 increase on an annual basis to a taxpayer with a property value of $100,000 market value. That's pretty much what you base it upon when you assess the average taxpayer. You assess off $100,000 market value property. So 1 mil would equal $35 on an annual basis. It would generate to the city approximately $330,000 annually. Over a 20-year period, that would generate $6.6 million, which would allow us to issue debt at approximately $5 million principal to be repaid over the 20-year period. So it's $5 million plus the interest associated with it, approximately $6.6 million all inclusive over a 20-year period. And you can take those same numbers for 2 mils. So I looked at 1.5 mils also. It would be $52.50 to an average taxpayer, generate almost $500,000 annually, $9.9 million over a 20-year period, which would allow us to issue $7.5 million in debt to be fully repaid by the additional millage. And then 2 mils, you would take the same approach, same mathematics associated with that. And that's of course based upon current market value.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
And it wouldn't impact us because we would have the dedicated revenue stream to pay for it.
Correct. It will not impact the city. Any questions on that? Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, so just to kind of recap what I'm hearing tonight. So the library, we will continue moving on with those conversations. As far as the recreation center, we will talk to GPD about looking at moving forward with the proposal on a renovation. We will continue talking to Bowen about what that looks like if we move a John M. Memorial Plaza and how we can do that in a good manner. And then we'll kind of circle back around to people after the GPD outcome and see where we're at, how much it would cost, and then maybe we can have another work session. Did I miss anything or not capture anybody's thoughts?
I just have one thing that we just have to keep in the back of our minds relating to the library. And that is, just as the schools thought about, what would happen, basically the school said that's how they were going to give the city the property. If, that was the condition that the building would revert to them. We have to think about that also. And I'm not saying that we would want the building necessarily to revert to us, but because of the location in our civic center, I think we need to give that some thought when we get to that point, whether it's a deed restriction or something, just, who knows what's going to happen in the future. I mean, clearly when the library builds new facilities, they build them for the long term, but, just like we built this one in the 90s and now, they're looking to move because it doesn't meet the need. I think we need to make sure that we're covering ourselves as far as what is going to happen, far into the future if that no longer serves the needs at that time.
Yeah, that's their standard agreement with cities, is the deed restriction reverting back. And, just as I had a conversation with Dr. Colares, I think we all need to keep in mind, this is single family zoning. So this is a conditional use with the library. We'll have to go through planning commission, just as if the school decides to take that land over and use it for school purposes. I've explained to him through our zoning code, it would be a conditional use. It would have to go through planning commission. I don't see any hiccups with that process for the school, but that's how we follow our current zoning code. So this is all single family, meaning these are all conditional uses for this particular parcel of land and that particular parcel of land. We appreciate your time. Jason Nolde, did you want to add anything?
No, I don't think so. I was here more to listen and take notes, but I mean, there's great opportunity here, obviously. So, bringing the library in and then pairing it with whatever you do with the recreation center. I mean, be a tremendous asset for the city.
I think having Jason here today, I think what we're trying to accomplish is, obviously he's our owner's rep for this current project. So we wanted to have that discussion about the plaza, but also, we're creating a look for our city with this new building, and we're not quite there yet, but we're going to want to model some of that look. So we have this kind of cohesive feel of a civic center at the end of the day. So that was definitely one of my questions. And, the library has worked with Jason specifically on projects in other communities. And so they said that they would work closely with city council and us and GPD to make sure that we're being cohesive with that look and we're getting what we need from the library.
When will there be samples available for us to view as far as what the options are going to be for the outside of the new facilities?
Sure. They just started looking at some possibilities, and they said they ordered some samples. So they're waiting on those samples of that first look to see if people like a particular brick that they were proposing. Well, there's two particular bricks, and they were waiting for those samples. So I guess we'll find out tomorrow. If Jason, do you know if they got those samples in?
I do not know. And I do know we talked as a team to come back to council at the end of April to provide a better update where we'll have high quality renderings and some give you a better feel for the aesthetics of the building versus the massing model that we looked at originally.
So having gone through this with the new fire station, I'm assuming that these materials are going to be available for us, to stop up at City Hall, in the conference room or somewhere and view so that we can see them up close.
Yeah, we can find a way to make it available, whether we leave them at the city or yeah, that's probably going to be the easiest means to do it if we don't have an in-person meeting.
Thank you, Jason. Well, thank you everybody for your time tonight. If you have any particular questions, all of these documents, with the exception of that plaza document, which I'll upload now, are available on board docs. And if something comes up, please don't hesitate to reach out. I know there was one question Jack was going to follow up on, membership specific on the ice rink. So he'll get that out to you soon.
Yeah, not just memberships, but basically who's using it. You know, I think we're trying to capture, I think we all suspect that it's not a whole lot of residents, but I think that's something, information that's going to be important for us to be aware of as we move forward.
Mayor, also, before we head out, just so I have everything, what else did you want us to kind of let you know about for anything moving forward, or, you know, our thoughts and everything, so that you know that, you know, you're on the right track, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so it would be 1, the library, 2, where we're going to go for the rec center, preference on building new, knowing what that would take, a private-public partnership, or renovating and expanding, looking at those options. If we were renovating, expanding, are we capturing the programming that we want to capture by just renovating the current facility, or expanding to include the programming that residents are requesting? And then the sponsorship idea of, you know, partnering with a hospital facility where they sponsor the building and also have lease out a particular space. There's also the conversation of whether we integrate the senior center within the recreation department, or keep that as a separate building, but that's really kind of a second thought. We're just trying to get past this point of where to go with the recreation center.
Personally, I think we're going to need to have the results of the study by GDP in order to, you know, say, you know, which way we think is going to be the better way to go.
I don't disagree with you. It's going to come down to money, like everything else.
I get a quick question to Katie and to Jack. I'm digging through this paperwork on this combined heat and power from natural gas, because I'm still stuck on this, because I believe back when I brought this up before, they had some energy efficient grants and bills in the House that possibly could be paid for. Maybe we could look into that, since we are going to maybe attempt to renovate this rec. Is energy efficiency on that rec center is what I'm always looking at, because it draws so much power. So I'm going to bring some of this stuff to the rec board and go over with the rec board. And maybe we can dig into if there's any kind of, just like the solar field, we can dig into something where we can power this rec through a generator and using that heat to heat that pole. I mean, it has worked, and I have paperwork showing it's worked in other areas. So it might be somewhere we can go to see if there's anything out there that could give us a hand on paying for some of this stuff on the energy efficient, any kind of energy efficient bills that are out there for the cities. Katie, what's your thoughts? I mean,
We'll continue to look at
getting into something like that if we're going to go ahead and start maneuvering around with this rec center on how we can save money on the cost to run this thing.
Kevin, I'm not sure if it's my connection or yours, but I'm hearing every other word. But what I hear is, you know, energy efficiency and capitalizing on opportunities. And we will certainly do that if those come up. I don't know if Jack's hearing you better than I am.
I heard you, and I think a lot of this, you know, we can address when GDP
And I said,
does
I'm
that.
going to bring some of this to Jack, are you hearing me?
I hear you.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Well, Kevin, you and Jack can talk offline as part of Recreation Committee and we can kind of go from there. Well, thank you again, everybody. Anything that we didn't cover tonight, feel free to reach out to us three and we can go from there. Otherwise, we'll move forward with looking at that assessment with GPD.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
one.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank
Easter.
you. Have a good evening.